Today we have a very exciting discussion and one of my favorites because we've got all police officers in this. It is challenge of punishing financial criminals to justice. The moderator for the session is Kanishk Gaur, founder India Future Foundation. Our speakers are Mr. Sanjay Kumar, Commissioner of Police, Kerala Police, Dr. Bal Singh Rajput, Deputy Commissioner of Police, Technology and Crime Prevention, Mumbai Police, Kiran Shivakumar, Superintendent of Police, Central Bureau of Investigation, Government of India. I'd like to hand it over to Kanishk to start the opening remarks and with the discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to host Dr. Bal Singh Rajput, Mr. Sanjay Kumar, and Mr. Kiran Shiva Kumar. We all have been witnessing that there has been large increase in the number of financial frauds and financial crime over the last 18 months. Given our country has been in multiple lockdowns and people have been working from home, phishing as a trend has caught up. While the police has made large efforts to control frauds, identity thefts, which lead to financial frauds, phishing, wishing attempts have been increasing for a to a large extent. And we have seen that technology has also evolved. A lot of transactions which were happening offline have moved online. Businesses which were primarily offline are now today online or are depending on existing online businesses to sustain. So there is large intervention of technology today, which happens for sustaining any kind of businesses, whether it was traditionally a restaurant that somebody was running or it was a bookshop. Now everything is moved to online, right from delivery of logistics to supply of medicines. Everything is happening online. But the bigger challenge that we face is there are large number of criminals who are coming out in a big way and are part of organized crime groups which are operating from different parts of the country. And the bigger issue is that India has such a large diaspora that it becomes sometimes challenging for law enforcement agencies to respond to these threats because it involves large amount of collaboration. And I'll take the example of the phishing attempts which happen. People get calls and they claim to be from credit card companies, and a lot of people end up trusting them and losing large amount of money. And then we have ATM related frauds which are coming into the picture. And I want to call out Dr. Bal Singh Rajput first. Dr. Bal Singh Rajput, you have been leading Maharashtra cyber for a long time. How have you seen the threat evolution in the last 12 to 18 months? What are the kind of criminal activities which you have seen have taken a significant rise? I will be keen to understand from you. And what are some of the measures which Maharashtra Cyber has taken to respond to them?
Yeah. Namaskar. Let us first understand that there is a difference between the uh, traditional financial frauds and the cyber financial frauds. Uh, if we take the online frauds, particularly phishing, maybe spear phishing, maybe ATM cloning, or credit card, debit card related frauds, or maybe frauds related to e-shoppings. These all frauds are coming under cyber financial frauds or cyber economic crimes. These crimes have a special feature is that they are committed using the internet, maybe any device, a mobile, laptop, anything. They are misusing the lacunas in the payment system, and particularly the most important thing is the human psychology. The people believe in the system and they take that for riding and commit the crime. If we see for last 2.5 years or maybe for last 2 years, if you see the progress of the UPI, which has now crossing more than 2 billion transactions. These particularly transactions are in the field of the e-wallets, particularly we can say small or tertiary payment providers who actually provide the payment solutions to the customers. And traditional banks are also there in this fray. If you see the quantum of fraud in the cybercrime domain, the RBI has published a data for last 5 years that more than 1 lakh crore rupees has been gulped by these criminals. That is no, whatever that banks have reported to the RBI. But if you see what kind of frauds that are taking place, we have to link it to the technology and how they are being exploited. So we know that phishing is the most important crime that has been there and has increased in volumes in multitude. We have seen how the Jamtara was operating through different kind of series. Many police have raided there. They have tried to understand the module. Jharkhand has done a well work. They created a nodal agency, a nodal person, a website, and they helped many police to apprehend the criminals. Now the different other locations like Bharatpur, Alwar, now some places in the Madhubani in Bihar, some places in Noida and some in in Haryana, particularly nearby to the Gurgaon. These places are coming up. Criminals, basically phishing criminals. They are having a call center. They are doing it maybe through mobiles with different SIM sales. So this is most important fraud. Second, it's e-shopping fraud. If you have seen Quicker or maybe no other e-shopping sites, people are being uh, duped on the pretext of being an army officer, maybe police officer, and they are showing the identity card, Aadhaar cards of that officers, and duping the gullible people who are going there for purchases. And third important is that the ATM and credit debit card related fraud. Nowadays, ATM transactions have come down as the different wallet service providers have increased, are more easy to operate. The card payments have declined, but still, if you see, the gangs are operating related to ATMs. A month, I think so, last month, you might have heard that there was a gang who withdraw more than crore rupees in a series of ATMs in Kolkata, and they were also caught. So these are the organized gang that are operating, particularly in cloning the ATM and understanding the ATM software and the ATM switch and misconfiguring it to withdraw the entire money from the ATMs. So these are some of the frauds. If you see the larger fraud that has happened, we can take the example of Cosmos Bank, in which the switch has, matlab, it's a banking switch is the most important thing in entire banking transactions. Maybe for e-wallets, maybe for traditional banks, because switch is the most important thing which routes entire transactions, which verifies every transactions. And criminals, in case of maybe Cosmos Bank and the Chennai Union Bank, in both the cases, they have manipulated with the switch. They created a fake switch, installed there, and then routed the transactions. So this fraud is related to Lazarus Group. So such kind of international gangs are also there in this cyber financial frauds. And if we talk about during Corona, I will say due to increase in transactions, there are there are directly proportional increase in the number of frauds, particularly cyber frauds. When I studied, my PhD topic was cyber financial crimes. When I studied the data for 2002 to 2016, I found that of the total crime registered and were available as a data on NCRB site, 60% of the crimes were committed only for financial reasons or financial gain. So we can say that most of the cyber crimes are for financial reasons. Very few are for other reasons. So that is the overall we can say ambit or overall no scenario of the cyber financial crimes in India.
Thank you, Dr. Bal Singh Rajput, for that input. And I want to bring in Sanjay here. Sanjay, you've been part of multiple cyber related activity. You were part of the Cyber Dome earlier. In parts of Kerala, what have been the trends in terms of cyber crime that you have seen, which have been impacting? And this crime, do you see there is a change in the use of technology, or there is a change in the way criminals have been doing crime?
Good afternoon, Kanishk. In fact, if you ask me regarding the trend of online financial crimes, it is similar to what Balsing has told. In fact, nationwide, uh, there is a tremendous increase of online frauds, online crimes, because we just cannot distinguish uh, like traditional crimes, where it was based upon territorial aspects. Since it happens online, so cutting across all the state boundaries, almost the trend is same. Maybe there may be certain differences in the response of the law enforcement agencies. How do we go about with this changing trend of online crimes? In fact, I would like to say that the online crime has penetrated in such a way that literally we just cannot distinguish between a traditional crime and online crime. It is just a misnomer that I think even traditional crimes that has got some kind of an online aspects. Here, like if we distinguish between the major online crimes, we can starkly divide into two types. Like one is totally hardcore cyber crime. I mean, it is entire fraud, entire thing happens with the help of a technology on internet. The other aspect is basically the technology endorsed, means here the fraud takes place, but to identify the victim or target the victim, generally the criminals use the technology. I mean, but finally, end of the day, the financial transactions, the fraudulent transactions takes place. In Kerala, what if we see, there is in fact, if we see the mobile and internet penetrations or the internet using is one of the highest in the country, and similarly, in the same proportionate, the online crimes have also increased. If you ask me, basically what we have done in Kerala is we have actually identified various layers how how this cyber crimes takes place. I mean, like for example, there are, if we take as a police is just an agency which actually investigates. If you have to bring the entire cyber criminals before the law, there are a lot many other things which has to be taken care, like police, whether it's a law enforcement, judicial, prosecution being judiciary, even the private parties, like unless and until private party also take care of their own security systems, then also the instances of the crime will be going higher. The fourth one is basically the public. I mean, the way the public is unaware, even the public who are aware also, the kind of the attacks happens using the social engineering and all. It is becomes very difficult to even a well aware, well educated persons are falling victim. Even in fact, persons from the IT sectors, persons from the bank are also getting victimized to such kind of a social engineering attacks. Obviously, then we have a certain legislation loopholes also, which makes us handicapped. Now, if we divide all these four aspects, there are lacunas in all these four things. When we talk about the police, obviously we are still 99% in the mode of a traditional policing only. Although uh, we talk about that we have placed cyber police stations in every police stations in every district, but still there's a long way to go about. I mean, the difficulties in data evidence collections or the difficulties in cooperation between the different states and all. So all these aspects we have actually just listed it out, and we are trying to improve upon each and every aspects, how we can uh, actually do a little better. Like two examples are there. One is Cyberdome. I think you may be aware about it. This is because whatever said and done, the police force is a very static one. I mean, and the cyber crime is ever growing. I mean, every day you'll be finding out some new way, mm, some different ways by which the attacks are taking place. It's like every moment it is growing. At the same pace, it's very difficult for the police to keep that pace. So here in Kerala, what we have did, we have made a PPP model, Cyberdome, where there are about 400 IT companies in Technopark Trivandrum and in Kerala. We have volunteers from them. They work join hand in hand with the police. It's like a give and take relationship. Wherever we find short or we find handicap, we take the help of those people, and it really has helped solving a lot of cases. There's another one platform which we are using is it's like we have made a one platform for including all the nodal officers of the bank, all the legal officers of the regulatory authorities, including RBI, all the payment gateway nodal officers. So if we are able to get an information of any fraud within 24 hours, we are able to block it. And it has given lot of positive results. I'm not sure whether it has been done in the other states or not, but it is really very useful. I mean, you don't even have to wait for registering an FIR and all. The moment you get an information that such and such fraud has taken place, immediately we go to that platform and we inform the concerned nodal officers, and it is blocked unless and until the money is withdrawn. Till that moment, we are able to successfully uh, block those transactions, and we have retrieved back the money. And on the same way, we are trying to improve upon the policing aspects also, legal aspects. I mean, Kerala just cannot work in isolation. So these are the aspects. I mean, the threats are definitely higher. I mean, still we feel that it's like, public has got a feeling. When you analyze the uh, the utility of giving a complaint to the police, and the utility what the public is going to get it back. So then the public feels that okay, even if you give the complaint to the police, then also maybe we will not be able to get that results. So that particular utility value, we focus that at least the people have that confidence to at least come up and give a complaint, so that at least we can update our system. We can know. So these are the few aspects, Kanishk, what we are doing in Kerala. That's all.
Sure. The other important aspect that we are seeing is that there is growth of organized crime, and I want to bring in Kiran here. Kiran, Dr. Bal Singh spoke about organized hacking communities such as Anonymous, Lazarus Group. As a country, do you see that we are under constant threat from organized hacking communities now, who have a financial motive to go after our country's critical assets or attack the financial services market as such? And if it's happening, what is the kind of response mechanism that we are trying to build today?
Good afternoon, all of you. Thank you, Kanish, for giving this opportunity. So it's a very, very pertinent and threat-laced question. So what happens is, we have seen what happened to Cosmos Bank, right? The money was transferred to some accounts in Hong Kong. That means the organized crime groups are international. Earlier, we heard about organized crime syndicates in maybe the Mumbai had seen the worst, like this underworld mafia and all, having connections at the most with across the border or max with Dubai. But now you see the organized crime groups, Lazarus, for example, allegedly being operated in North Korea, which is miles apart. The money being transferred to some account in Hong Kong. You see the Bangladesh bank heist, $81 million Bangladesh bank heist of 2016. So the money went to some casinos in Philippines. The certain SIM cards, the numbers were used, which were from India. Bangladeshis were involved. Some money was recovered in Sri Lanka. Some money went to China. So this kind of a crime, it's mostly like, as Bal Singh told, these are cyber financial offenses. So like any other cyber offense, This is a crime sans barriers. So my inside the country, of course, I have my jurisdiction. Kerala police do have a jurisdiction in UP under section 48 of the CRPC and vice versa. But my powers end at Kanyakumari, not any further. Or my policing power ends at Amritsar, Wagah border, not across. So even if you consider those friendly countries, those who have investigated, those who have sent the mutual legal assistance treaty and letter rogatory request, know how cumbersome it is. So now in a financial crime, especially with the help of internet, and now you have mobile internet. So the entire world is in a 5-inch screen. So with the advent of digital India, the national payments interface, UPI interfaces, and all the banks have now apps to kind of transfer money for any kind of banking transaction. Paytm has revolutionized it, Bheem app. So people can send money. Now, if a fraud happens, fraud could be anything, starting from a phishing attack or a spoofing attack or an identity fraud or any kind of transaction fraud. The money can be moved from your country to another country in a matter of seconds through SWIFT protocols. People say that, okay, SWIFT protocol was kind of revalidated and reinforced after the Bangladesh bank attack. But what happened in the Cosmos attack? The people, if we are doing some R&D, the criminals also are. So coming to the organized gangs. So motives, yes, I'll come to that. Organized gangs, earlier, let us put it in a perspective. Like when one person decides to do something, if he has a very good skill, he might attack his friend or his enemy or his disgruntled. If he is a disgruntled employee, he might attack the systems of his employer and not more. He might not attack the nuclear power plant. He might not attack a bank. But now nation states are doing this, and which is very scary. I've heard about the Chinese unit 16198, which the PLA army having a cyber warfare unit, or many countries have such things. So now they have highly motivated, highly paid individuals and highly skilled individuals who can do this. And now, like any other cybercrime, the threat of attributability is very less. When you do a murder on the street, that murder can be attributed to you. Even if you are a mafia, even if you are a hooligan, at some point of time, the people they know, even if they go and dispose of the court or not, people know that this is the fellow who done that. They wreak havoc in the society by having that atmosphere of fear. But now, in the cyber world, there is anonymity, encryption, anonymity, and the veil of privacy. This creates a cloak of more anonymity to these people, and they think, and it's partly true, that attributability or there is a plausible deniability. So now Lazarus can always deny we didn't do that, or maybe even if Lazarus doesn't, the North Korean government can say we didn't do this, we didn't get them to do this. So getting the proof from another country, you know how easy/difficult it is. So now, when you come to the motive for any crime, there are three things. One is a motive, opportunity, and the absence of lawful guardians. Why are you and I not a criminal? No, in the traditional way, because one, we don't have motives. Even if we have, we may not have opportunities. Even if you have, then you are afraid of the society in which you live in, your family, your friends, your social circle. But transpose yourself to the cyber world, especially the lucrative financial market. Now, if the only thing that you want to have is motive and the requisite skills, even the skills are there for hire, I'll come to that. Now, it's very easy to commit a crime or get a crime committed because there are no lawful guardians. There are no guardians at all. Who polices you? The police can't be present everywhere in the internet highway. So every traffic looks pretty innocuous. So all these intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems do exist. Now, one step ahead, you get attacked, and now the financial markets, again, as we saw, it's a pretty lucrative thing. The money involved is huge. In a normal crime, the money involved is very less. But there were around 1.4 lakhs transaction fraud reported / unreported both in the last year, costing 600 crores of estimated loss. Some money might have gotten back, some money might not have. So now your money, hard-earned money, is moved. Now what we hear is my money in the bank is being fleeced out through a phishing call. This is not even the tip of the iceberg. It is just the tip of the mount. The rest, the iceberg, the top of the iceberg above the water is still there. We have seen the bank heists. You don't need to go with a gun. The days of the machine gun and the baklava are over. Balaclava and the machine gun are over. Now I can do the same with a click of a button. Why should I bother? Risk my life and go to a bank and try to loot it. I can do it with a click of a button. Now you have something more interesting. You have crime as a service. You go to the dark web, you can get people to commit a crime. You can get somebody write a code for you. You can get somebody write a malware for you. And you can get somebody to put that malware into the victim's computer, victim bank's computer. You can get a third person to transfer the money from the victim bank to some other account, or maybe transfer it to cryptocurrencies and put it into some other accounts abroad. A couple of days back, the cryptocurrency wallet Binance came up with an investigation where they have allegedly helped the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Ukrainian police to get hold of certain criminals who used to do fraudulent transactions in cryptocurrencies. Critical infrastructure. So what is a critical infrastructure in the fintech? Banks, the regulatory authority, capital markets. So I'm yet to get through anything that can manipulate the capital market. But if you remember these the co-location scam in SEBI, this was a not cyber related thing, but this was not a hack. But if something like that can be done, if I can do a distributed denial of service attack on the Bombay Stock Exchange servers, giving access to only a certain set of brokers, I can wreak havoc in a day. So anything is possible. I'm very sure they have robust systems to prevent this, because nowadays modern servers do have systems to prevent or detect the DOS attacks. It's not easy, as I say, but skilled people, sky is the limit. I cannot do it. That doesn't mean nobody else cannot do it. So now capital markets is one of the most critical sectors. Now with financial inclusion, as we saw, more and more people, 1.3 billion people of India in no time will become financially inclusive. So even if people have on an average 1,000 rupees in their account, see the quantity of money that is involved. The amount of the detail, the sheer gargantuan size of the transactions that will happen in a single day. So if somebody can do a salami attack of maybe 0.1% of the entire slice of money that gets transacted in a day, even people to people transactions can be a critical point. So now everything is critical in fintech. So how do you prevent it? With more robust red flagging mechanisms, eKYC, better checks and balances. And now Kanish did discuss about the artificial intelligence and machine learning in this. So now, yes, these machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence methods do give us a important idea, give us a very good idea towards detecting the certain patterns. So now there are certain merchants who do fraudulent transactions. They collect payments online from innocent buyers in lieu of providing a service. I'm just giving an example. Or shipping a product, but they do not honor their commitment after receiving the payment, many times even in full. So it is very critical for a digital payments company like Paytm or maybe UPI, for example, to not to allow such payments. So now there is something called a I mean, if you have heard of privacy by design, there can be something called a safe by design. So these basic safety mechanisms can be thought of. Digital payment companies should not allow those such payments in order to save the buyers from the hassles of running from pillar to post. So how do you do that? There is a thorough KVC checks can be done, and the merchant's online footprint can be checked. There is a digital footprint which can be checked. Previous complaints are a big thing. So now everything we are speaking over WebEx channel now. So now there is a digital footprint of mine. And the same thing is a vice versa. The fraud detection is a continuous learning process. The fraudsters, as we learn, the fraudsters are also learning. They come up with new ways to fool the fraud detection systems and to bypass them. And it is very important for the digital payment companies to come up with new algorithms, better their algorithms in identifying such red flags. So now artificial intelligence, reinforcement learning. So there are terms in machine learning like the supervised learning and unsupervised learning, non-supervised learning. So basically we have to harness the machine-human collaboration, making the machine learning algorithm continuously take feedback from the humans, because I would tend to believe that the humans are more talented and resourceful than the machine. So the machine learning algorithm should take continuous feedback from the humans and to improve themselves to become more and more accurate. So taking one step further, so there was a discussion on something called the exploration exploitation thing. So this was thought of during the, you've heard about the deep fakes. So it's something that deep fake, an algorithm keeps exploring new ways in which basically I'm putting it into the fraud perspective. Actually, it is to fake it. It is to create a fake image. Now algorithm should manifest in a the fraud can be manifest in a particular transaction. Algorithm identifies it. Then the second algorithm tries to better that, and it runs in a loop. So this is already there. This exploration exploitation thing. This is already there. So this is already documented. These are not my ideas, but these are all documented. So what I mean to say was, but can our fintech use SBI? Maybe it may be possible for them to use such mechanisms, but not small cooperative banks. So for they have to create a pool database of such frauds, such merchants, such buyers, and they need to create at least some basic critical infrastructure protection mechanisms. So that is the only way to protect, because we need to guard our houses. The only way to do this is to guard and to have good detection systems. Now, when because the world has evolved now in terrorism and in child pornography and child sexually abusive material, the people are cooperating in minutes, if not in seconds. So now this will also evolve, and I hope that the multi-agency and the international cooperation in this field will increase in due course, and then the criminals can definitely be brought to book. Thank you.
Thanks, Kiran. I want to bring in Sanjay here. Sanjay, do you think, with what Kiran spoke, there is a need that legislations in India need to evolve to fight cybercrime, right? We saw recent changes in the intermediary guidelines. Do you think we need more changes in the law?
Kanishk, I have a totally different opinion about it. See, what happens if you ask me for having to keep our system safe, whether it is at an organization level or whether it's a national level. What I personally feel, it requires three different things. The first one is having a very robust system. Like for example, if I buy a laptop, then I have a good system uploaded with a lot of antivirus, firewalls, and all. Similarly, it is applicable to the organization and even for the nation. But as we all know that however robust system you build, it is not 100% safe. It can be penetrated, it can be attacked. The second aspect is a human dimension of the cyber security, where we all know that most of the cyber attack happens not because of the failure of the robust system, but because of the be not following a cyber hygiene, and there are certain human errors which takes place. The statistics also says that about 70 to 80% attacks happens because of the human error, human negligence. So both, even if you build a robust system, even if you build a human dimension, so then also the attacks are going to happen. The third parameter is the legal system, where in case if any criminal is able to bypass your robust system, and if your human have committed any kind of an error and attack has taken place or fraud has taken place, the legal mechanism should be sufficient enough to bring that criminal before the law. And somehow uh, we just can't say that our legal mechanism uh, is sufficient or is optimum enough to bring that kind of a deterrence. So it is like a vicious circle. The more the cyber criminals now have a higher profitability and a lower deterrence, because of which they keep on investing on attacking the cyber attacks, and resulting which the IT companies they start investing a lot of money in the cyber security. And it's like it's like an economy going on. Nobody is serious about I'm talking about the whether it's a national level or it is international level. We have done very little on the law enforcement aspects, where we could actually come in hand, or we can build a platform where we can really bring those criminals before the justice. So this is one thing. Second thing is, sometimes what happens, there are certain legislations which I personally feel that it adds on to the cyber crimes, because most of the legislations which comes, like for example, I'll tell you, in just a couple of years back, a GDPR came into EU, European Union, and on the same line, we are also going to bring a data protection bill and all. Now, if you ask me, after the advent of GDPR, whether it is going to increase the cyber crime or will it reduce? Definitely, the GDPR is basically for taking care of the privacy of the persons, but it is like it will increase lot of cyber crimes also. Like for example, earlier before the GDPR came into the picture, if anybody breaches into the data of some organization, what those hackers, now they have those data, what they were doing with those data, they will sell it to somebody, they will go and post it in somewhere dark web, and they might get money or they might not get money. But now after coming the GDPR Act, it is like a sure shot money. If I am able to penetrate your system, if I am able to get your data, then anyway, the legislation says that that IT company who is the custodian of that particular data will be penalized by that particular company. So, and that penal amount is very heavy. I mean, it goes to even 40% of your total turnover of your business. Now, as an hacker, if I have your data, and as an IT company, I come to you and say that I hold your data and have breached your data. Now you just say whether should I go and tell to the safety commissioner, or are you ready to bargain with me? Look here, like any amount which is lesser than the penalty what the IT company is going to get, he will be ready to bargain. That is number one. Second thing, the company also bargains with the criminals on the ground that this particular reputations might be saved. He might also be saved from individual suits and all. That is one. Second thing is, such legislation also brings a lot of open source tool which is available with the police organizations to during investigation. Like earlier, I used to use certain tools which was openly available, which was helping me during the investigation. But now that comes under the Privacy Act. Now I have to approach to that particular individual or organization to get those data. That is again making a hurdle for the investigation. So similarly, a lot of privacy laws across the country that becomes an obstacle for investigation. Now, so that is a different perspective. I mean, generally, sometimes what happens, those legislations are used against, or it acts as a hurdle for the investigation. Now, when you come to the legislation in India, we have predominantly some 2-3 acts. I mean, the most important was basically an IT Act which was enforced in 2000. But the persons who might have read about IT Act 2000, it does not actually caters much to handle the cyber crimes. It is like a more of a more of like a transactions, or providing a platform for the business purposes and all. Only when in 2008 there was some incident, some DPS, one incident took place, then there was a lot of hue and cries, and then there was an amendment in 2008. Few of the cyber crimes was added up in the IT Act, and still today there are so many loopholes, so many lacunas, so many provisions what an individual experiences in the form of online crimes or online transactions. Those things are not included in the in those IT Act. There is a lot of scope where the IT Act needs to be expanded. The other act, obviously, it is IPC traditional, which deals with the normal traditional crimes, but due to some over the period of the time, we have made some amendment and also included those crimes which is happening on the online also has been included in the IPC. That also attends to it. Apart from this, there are certain other minor acts also, like Money Laundering Act, which is not very predominantly used by the police. But if you ask me whether the legislation is sufficient, I would like to say that no, we still need to improve upon the legislation. Apart from the legislation, what I understand is there has to be a capacity building among the police. There has to be capacity building and understanding and awareness, or the training given to the prosecution, to the judicial part. There are so many instances where enforcing agency bring as an evidence, but where the place where we are putting those evidences is not being understood. So there is a large amount where this entire holistic approach has to be made. Similarly, it is as I told, if we are not able to give justice to the people, or if we are not able to bring those criminals before the law, then there will be lack of confidence among the public, and public will not resort to come to the police for registering a case. That will be again a lesser deterrence to the criminals, and we as an enforcement also agency also, we won't be able to improve upon it. So so that's what I feel. We need to improve
Thanks.
upon it so much.
Sure, thanks, Sanjay. I'll bring in Dr. Bal Singh Rajput here. Dr. Bal Singh Rajput, I've got certain questions from the audience. What are some of the challenges which law enforcement agencies face today while dealing with cyber financial crime, particularly with respect to recovering money, which the victims have lost? There's a lot of petty crimes which happen, but there are organized crimes as well where people have lost lakhs of money, crores of rupees. So, what are some of the challenges which you face? Because this money, once it goes from the bank account, it's very difficult to get that money back.
Yeah, it's if you see the money trail in financial crimes, the two things are important in cyber financial things. One is money trail, mapping the money trail, and mapping the technology trail. In financial crimes, the core thing, our core incentive for a criminal is the money, and that trail we need to map it. For any investigation agency, that is the most important. But if you see the challenges that are faced by the law enforcement agencies, first challenge they face that most of the complainants, they don't report it. Having less amount, they have lost it, maybe 500 to 2,000 rupees. They don't come to the police station. They only shoot a complaint. They don't file a FIR, but try to recover money from the concerned bank or concerned wallet, and that becomes difficult for police. First thing. Second thing, now the wallet payments. If you see, within a second, we can have hop from one wallet to another wallet. And these wallets are mostly dependent on one KYC, that is the mobile number. So if a person or if a criminal have procured many fake SIM cards, he may be able, and they are able to establish different payment wallets, and they are hopping the money from one wallet to another in 7 to 8 hops. It becomes for police very difficult to chase that money. Third thing, that criminals are using ATMs to withdraw the money immediately once they receive the money. So once the money from digital to physical converted, it becomes very difficult to trace it in cash format. If you see the many of the phishing attacks or even the big cyber attacks like the Cosmos, where the money was immediately withdrawn all over the world. In case of Cosmos, it was 35 countries that were used to withdraw the money, because digital hopping, we can chase the trail. In physical hopping, once the digital to physical is converted, it's become difficult to chase it. So this is a we can say second most important hurdle. Third hurdle that we face when recovering money and investigating it is gathering the data, because we have only one point, that is where the where the victim have lost the money. But after that, getting the information from different service providers, particularly wallet companies, and some of the wallet companies don't have their India-based operations. They store data somewhere else. Most of the other service providers, particularly if you see the particular web hosting services. So take example of Namecheap. If any particular link has been created, suppose there is a fraud, people give a link, particularly of any days, help days. This is a root access kind of link. And they ask that you press the link and do a 1 rupees transaction. I will send 1 rupee or you send a 1 rupee, and then this is the procedure, and then you send me the money. Once you click the link and do a 1 rupee transaction, entire data related to your account, your password, your CV, whatever that is there, is transferred to them. And then they stole the money. But when we go for getting information about that link, it's become difficult, because two companies, one is VPN and VPS companies, particularly Cloudflare or Inifera, they don't share information. Or if you go to ask the information about that particular website, it is hosted by the Namecheap, then they don't provide the information. So it becomes a hurdle, because this is an international ecosystem that is created to operate the internet on different services. But for a police who operates on jurisdictional basis, who operates within the parameters of the law, it becomes difficult to police to or any other law enforcement agencies to get that information. That is the biggest hurdle. Third thing is a golden hour, the time within which if the complainant reports to police may in some cases can hold the money. But if they report to police after maybe 2 days or 3 days or 4 days, it becomes very difficult for police to trace the money and give it back to the victim. But now I would like to cite two examples which are very important interventions by the government. Every state government has their own intervention that is to help the victims. But two interventions that has happened nationally, one is Cyber Portal and second is the Cyber Safe. So Cyber Portal allows any victim, despite knowing the jurisdiction, they can launch a complaint. And that complaint automatically through their geolocation or through with their, if they have mentioned the location, it goes to the police station. And second thing is the Cyber Safe. Cyber Safe is very important, and the MHA is very keen to spread to all the states, because one helpline 155260. If you call on that helpline and give the information that is relevant regarding your complaint, they are able to freeze that money where it was sent to. Maybe different wallet service providers or maybe the banking companies. So this is very important because they have coordinated with different wallet service providers, ISPs, TSPs, and banking service providers, and are able to stop the money. This is very important intervention, and we should spread a word about that. The another thing is the if you see technological challenges that police face is due to some of the every company have different privacy policies. The financial sector companies or fintech companies have different policies. The other service providers, TSP, ISPs have different privacy policies. They of their own, and government till as government of India has not cleared the Data Privacy Act. We don't have an overall privacy policy and data sharing policy. So companies are sharing those data only which don't reveal entire information of the criminal. They are keeping, if you ask Google or Facebook to share information about the mobile number, email ID, their IP addresses, so they will cite that okay, this information you have to ask through MLAT, but the other relevant information they give, so which exposes the identity of the criminals. Some of the MNCs, some of the companies, because there is not a law in Indian, we can say, parlance, they are not sharing the relevant information. Even the someone sent as per 92 CRPC, or maybe someone sent as per the 79(3)(b) of the IT Act, or maybe other provisions, they are not giving correct information. So divide of that information, law enforcement agencies will not be able to proceed further. So this aspect of sharing of information by the MNCs, by the other companies, citing their different privacy policies is a big hurdle. Take example of a Twitter. Twitter says if any fraud, because the fraud also happens through Twitter, they cite advertisements, give different mobile numbers to contact for the services, and once we ask the service provider, they don't provide the entire information. This is about information sharing. The last one is about the we can say the encrypted technologies which are being used for different kind of scams. Take example from 2016 to till date in India, after the demonetization, many people who had cash in hand, which was illegal, they have invested into bitcoins and different other coins. But these coins, even though they registered the complaint with the police, it has become very difficult for the police to map the technology trail, because once one is encrypted, as the Kiran sir told, that it is encrypted and it's anonymous. So encryption and anonymity both are become a hurdle. It is a, if you see a case of WhatsApp versus Government of India, it is the trail can be mapped, but companies are not happy with that. They don't want to give that control to the government, even though there is a judicial or maybe government or maybe administrative oversight. So these are the some of the hurdles that are to be taken into consideration while considering the large challenges of the law enforcement agencies.
Thank
I
you.
would like
Thank
to
you.
cite two other
Sorry,
two other.
Dr. Balsing Rajput, we have run out of time.
Oh, sorry.
So
Yeah.
my apologies. With this, thank you so much. We come to the end of this session. I'd like to thank Dr. Balsing Rajput, Mr. Sanjay Kumar, and Mr. Kiran Shivakumar for taking out time for this session. Thank you so much, everyone. I will hand it back to our host, Mr. Yatin Dharne from INI.
Thank you, speakers. Thank you, Ganesh, for a very interesting conversation. I think our delegates have enjoyed it thoroughly about the nuances of law enforcement and financial fraud. To close this session, we would like to thank our session partner Refinitiv, gold partners Ria Keta, Netherlands Embassy, Cybersprint, bronze partner Onfido, and knowledge partner EY to make this event happen. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, Ganesh, for a
Thank you.
wonderful session. Thank you.